Greetings, metaphysicians. This is episode 143, Leave Room for God. And what are we talking about here? Well, we're not talking about leaving room between you and your partner at a middle school dance. We're talking about control and planning and how maybe to not do that so much and see what wondrous things happen when you have that space. Enjoy the episode.
You're listening to Let's Get Metaphysical. This podcast explores the spiritual and metaphysical world through the experiences and opinions of the host and those interviewed. It should not necessarily be seen as direct endorsement or personal advice to our listeners. We encourage you to use your own discernment, judgment, and intuition regarding anything you learn from this show.
Let's get meta.
Welcome to the Let's Get Metaphysical podcast. I'm your host, Renata Maniaci. Here to remind you that you are an eternal spiritual being having a temporary human experience here on lovely planet Earth. That's right. Your body's temporary. Your mind is temporary. Even your personality, your ego, your likes and dislikes in this lifetime, your abilities, your tastes and distastes. It's all temporary for this particular lifetime and this incarnation and how you needed to be for this role that you're playing in the grand scheme of your soul's evolution. You needed to be this way in this lifetime with that face and those diseases and those abilities and those handicaps and whatever else. It's temporary. So make the most of it. This is season 7, Heaven on Earth. And this is episode 143, Leave Room for God. And the first time that I heard that phrase was in reference to a middle or high school dance, as in the boy and the girl dancing needed to not be as close as they were. They needed to leave more space in between them, leave room for God. But that's not the connotation I mean for this episode. What I'm really getting at is control and a human tendency to want to control their lives, other people's lives, your own life, what happens in a day, etc. And how this concept of leaving room for God is one of the most expansive, evolutionary, blissful things that you can do. So let's jump into this episode, shall we? Are you ready? Let's get meta. Masters and angels, I request your presence, guidance, and support through this episode. Please help these words to be useful to all listeners on their evolutionary journey. Let me know the truth, speak the truth, become the truth, and be the truth. And please let this episode reach whoever needs to hear it. Thank you with gratitude and full faith. Bless creation. So this concept of leaving room for God was not something that I was particularly good at for the grand majority of my life. Even when I was young, well, I don't really remember much before age 7 or 8. I don't know. Do most people? It's not something I really remember, but from the time that I can remember, I really thrived on structure. I really thrived on having my whole day planned out. And that worked for me. I was able to get my work done and my play done and be in sports and just have everything kind of scheduled, have the time filled. And that worked well for me. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I knew what was coming. and I could be excited for what was coming, or just resigned to the fact that I needed to do what was coming. And the idea of free time or leaving room for the unknown or spontaneity, it didn't really appeal to me at all. And this was, before I had a faith practice. I believed that there was a higher power, a higher source, but I didn't really dote on it or dwell on it. I was uncomfortable with the word God for the longest time, as I've said before on this show. And I think that was mostly because of how religion had, various religions, not just one, but religion had corrupted that word. I didn't realize that at the time, but I was very uncomfortable with the way that the word God was being used. So I wasn't thinking of the higher power, the all that is, the universe, the divine as that word, which shows how far I've come since I'm using it in the title of this episode. And it's not the first time that I've used the word God in the title of an episode. And Ren 10 years ago wouldn't have even listened to something with the word God in an episode or a movie title or something like that. That's how difficult and uncomfortable that word made me. And it probably is making some of you or other people in the world who might happen to read this episode title feel. It might make them uncomfortable and them not want to listen to an episode that's titled like this. It might make them go in the opposite direction or think, oh, that podcast is religious, or that podcast is Bible thumping, which couldn't be further from the truth, as I've never actually read the Bible. So what I'm getting at here is that the idea, these two things are related. Me being uncomfortable with having free time and me being uncomfortable with the word God and that kind of concept are related. Were related when those were realities in my life. This whole concept of leaving room for God has really come in for me the last 2 to 3 years, because up until my full adulthood, I really also did enjoy being planned, having structure to my life, knowing what was coming, being able to see about 2 years ahead in my life. Not every single thing, but basically knowing what was coming. I liked that. That comforted me for some reason. But living like that does not really allow for any spontaneity. And what I've found over the last several years is that spontaneity is fun. It's what makes me feel alive. It's what helps magic to come into a day or a moment. It brings bliss and excitement and passion and wonder. And wonder is something that we don't really get much of, I feel like, especially after childhood, especially after we feel like we've figured out the world. Like, okay, there's nothing more to, be in that state of wonder about. But I've found that spontaneity does that. And you can't have spontaneity when everything is planned and when you stick to that plan. Or when you're uptight about when plans change or uncomfortable when plans change. And that used to be me. Very much frustrated, annoyed, and uncomfortable if plans changed. or if the timing for something changed. And I think that very much went back to wanting to be in control for some reason. That illusion that I had control over my day, control over my life. And we do to some extent, but we really don't to a greater extent than we realize. A lot of the things that befall us are planned. They're in the blueprint. They're gonna happen. You might push them off for a while somehow with your choices, but if something needs to happen in your life for your own evolution and your raising of your consciousness and your lessons and your growth, it's gonna happen. You can't stave it off forever. And what I'm getting at here is when I started to see how wonderful, and literally the word wonder is in the word wonderful, right? Full of wonder, wonderful. How wonderful being spontaneous and allowing that space for the divine to come in. When I realized how amazing that is, it slowly became something that I was more and more comfortable with. Slowly, right? It's not like one thing happened and I was like, ooh, I want to leave more room for God. I want to leave more room for the divine. And that's where I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at with the word spontaneity. It means to not be planned, to leave things open, to allow. This isn't the official definition of it, but if I were to define spontaneity, the definition would literally be leaving room for God or leaving room for the divine to come in and to help to guide that time period, that moment, that situation, that experience, allowing the infinitely intelligent, wise, knowing universe and divine and God to come in into that space to create the most wonderful, wondrous, amazing experience that you could not have planned yourself. And I really started to get this back in 2019 while I was traveling. I went on like a 5-month world travel. I was able to do that at that time. And I mentioned this before here, but when you travel, unless you're completely planned down to the minute, which is something, again, that I used to do while I was traveling and know exactly what I was doing every day and where I was going and where I was sleeping and what I was going to eat. And, that's how I used to be. But when you travel, sometimes things don't go the way that you plan them, more so than maybe other moments in life when you're not traveling. Like when you're home, it might be easier to control things. You know your house, your car, your work, your routes, even the traffic at different times of day. You know all that. But when you're traveling, there's things you can't account for. And so that allows for this unplanned space sometimes, this unplanned time, this availability for the divine to come in, for spontaneity. And so since that time, I've been trying to allow more space. And more than that, if I'm being completely honest, my angelic teams have told me to allow lots more space than I would generally like to allow myself. Now I'm completely fine with it, and I see how much joy and wonder those situations do bring me. So I have no problem with it now. But when they started to say this, which was very clear last summer when I got to spend a few weeks in Northern Europe and Scandinavia, my angelic teams basically said, you can have this, you can plan this particular thing, but leave the rest of it open. which was a new concept for me while traveling, not knowing how many days I was going to spend in a place, not knowing, when I was flying somewhere else or if I was going to train or take a boat or whatever. That was a new concept for me, but it was so magical. And the people I met were so perfect and key to those moments in my life that it was like a switch kind of flipped fully. It was like moving, almost flipped, but then like that happened. And now I have this recognition, this understanding of just how truly divine and guided and fully supported your life can be if you allow that space, if you leave that room for God, for the divine, for the universe, for the source, for the all that is, for whatever, however you interpret divinity around you. And what it has done is allowed my faith to grow. And when I talk about faith, I'm not talking about faith in a religious context, because there's not a particular set of beliefs and rules and constructs that were formed around a religious ideology that I am talking about when I talk about faith. What I mean by increase my faith means increase my understanding, knowing, and connection to the divine source that is running this creation. Faith that this construct, this planet, this trajectory, all the people, all the things, all the situations, positive or negative, neutral, that all of it is happening for some reason or reasons unknown to me on this level, ununderstood, not understood by me while I'm in this body. But the faith part that my soul has and holds 100% of, 1,000% of, that trickles down into this body, that trickles down into this mind. It trickles down into my entire being, that everything is happening divinely. And when I leave more space, when I leave more room for God, for the divine, for the all that is, to come in and arrange my day, arrange my experience, allow for me to be met by this person at that time, or be in the right place at the right time, or get these acknowledgments from the universe that this is right, this is correct, this is the direction I'm supposed to go. When I didn't plan it, when I didn't plan any of that, I just left space. And then I get all of these signs that blow my mind, because they're acknowledgments from the divine that I'm on the right path. That not only builds faith that everything is touched, I'll say everything is touched by the divine, it also makes life a lot of fun. A lot of fun, a lot of playfulness, a lot of bliss, a lot of divinity, a lot of the things that I frankly want more of in my life. And I can give you really specific examples from where I am right now. I am currently traveling in New Zealand, and most of this trip, like the last one, I have been asked to be very unplanned and open about, and asked by my angelic teams, leave it open. There's a few things I was allowed to plan, and everything else is not plannable. Let me give you some examples of this, some real world examples. I was essentially told by my teams to spend about 9 days, 9 days in Auckland, in New Zealand, right? That's a long time to be anywhere while you're traveling, let alone in Auckland, where, you read any New Zealand book and they're like, you can spend 1 day in Auckland and then go and do this and do that and go to the South Island and go climb this glacier and blah, blah, blah. Like, nothing will tell you to spend 9 days in Auckland. But I listened to my team, so I planned to spend 9 days in Auckland. Had no idea what I was going to do that whole time. No idea who I was going to meet. And I will go into a few specific examples, but that time was so magical and guided and incredible. There's no way I could have planned that. There's no way I could have planned all of the wonderful people that I met. I have friends now. Like, I have a handful of people who I consider friends that live there now and in the surrounding areas that I met in seemingly random ways, but who I was supposed to meet. One of those people was, I like to go on free walking tours. That's a whole thing, like in all the big cities around the world. It's called free walking tour. You've probably heard of it, but you can sign up for them and then you just tip the tour guide at the end, but it will show you, they generally just show you around the city and all the main points of the city. And I like to do that to get oriented on my first day, if I haven't spent time somewhere already. So I go on a walking tour. I went actually on 2 different ones in 2 different neighborhoods, and one of them I became friends with. And by that, I mean we exchanged numbers, and we were kind of like texting each other once or twice throughout the next day or two. And at one point, while I was with 2 other friends that I had met in wonderful ways, me and these 2 friends were getting dinner at this place and eating it right outside of the restaurant where there was a seat. And while that was happening, I was texting with this new friend, the tour guide, and I was just sending him a text because we were trying to see if we could meet up for lunch or something in the coming days. And I sent the text, and then not 10 seconds later, the person who was sitting behind me on this bench, we were basically back to back, stands up, and it's him. It's the tour guide that I had literally just texted. So it's these kinds of things that are acknowledgments from the universe that something is happening or that you're in the right place. Another thing was I met somebody who happened to live on Waiheke Island and works at one of the vineyards there and wanted me to come visit. So I went over with another new friend, and we had the most beautiful, spontaneous, amazing day. Olive oil tasting, wine tasting, just a little bit. I'm really not a huge wine fan, but it was beautiful. It was a really, really beautiful vineyard. We went to the beach. We went to lunch. It was one of the most beautiful, spontaneous days that I've had in a long time. And there's no way I could have planned that. We took a ferry over to the island and got in a stranger's car, essentially, and it ended up being great. I'm not advocating this for anybody else, but this is the way that it went, and it was amazing. And one of the travelers that I met, and we ended up traveling a little bit together out of Auckland afterwards, she wrote me a text oh no, a little card just to say goodbye when we parted ways. And on it, she wrote something that is on a hat. I only wear 2 hats, to block from the sun. And it's not even the hat that I brought along. I have 2 hats that are from Wisconsin. And the one that I brought along refers to my drive-in theater in Door County, which I love, the Skyway. If you ever get a chance, go to Skyway Theater in Door County, Wisconsin. Not being paid for that. And my other hat I left in Costa Rica, and it says Wisconsin, comma, or no. It says Wisconsin or no. Just because it's funny, and because in Wisconsin we add or no at the end of a lot of sentences. I think it's probably because we're kind people and we don't ever want people to feel like they're trapped with us. So we give them an out by saying or no. So I have that hat in Costa Rica, which I never mentioned to this new friend at all and never said it. Like I never said that at all. And in the postcard that she left me, she wrote in the address part, Wisconsin, comma, or no. Right? Like, so there's things like this, things that come out in speech, in actions, in just running into people. I can't tell you how many times I ran into people, my new friends, my 6 new friends in Auckland over and over and over again. And Auckland's a city. And to the point where I asked them, is this normal is it normal to just run into people? And they're like, no, there's 1 million people in this city. It's not normal. But it just kept happening. And so why am I telling you all this down to this detail? These are examples of what can happen when you leave room for God, when you leave room for spontaneity, when you allow this space to happen. And when also you listen to your guides, you listen to your soul, your angelic teams, your higher self, when you make that connection, which I always make an effort to do, especially when I'm traveling, but every day in my life anyway, when they tell me to do something, I have a good enough relationship with them that I trust them. And maybe that's just the higher part of me, but I refer to as my angelic teams because it feels like I'm talking to those beings. I am talking to those beings, right? But when I do that, amazing, miraculous things happen. Really beautiful friendships are made. Really divine situations arise. And when those things happen, when that happens, your faith can't do anything but grow. Your faith in the divine, your faith in the way things are, the way that things are playing out, it can't but grow. Your wonder can't but grow. And that's the stuff that I'm living for right now. I'm living for this. So I'm going to leave it there for today. I hope that you see that there are benefits to leaving room for God. Take it or leave it. Bonus content is a clearing, removing anything that's blocking us from leaving room for God, anything that we're allowed to clear. And for me, that would have been a lot of control habits that I've let go of over the last several years, and I'm super grateful for because life is so much more fun and enjoyable and exciting now. And I thought I had a great life before, so we'll leave it there for today. Thank you as ever. Thank you so much for listening. Stay positive, stay safe, and stay meta.
The Let's Get Metaphysical podcast is an Up and Awaken production and is produced and hosted by Renata Maniaci. Our intention is to raise the vibration of the planet by sharing, validating, and normalizing spiritual and metaphysical experiences. If you are ready to raise your vibration, you might enjoy our free Let's Get Meta Master Clearing. To receive the Master Clearing or to learn more about the podcast, visit letsgetmeta.com. The Let's Get Meta podcast is inspired by angels and supported by angels. If you would like to be a patron angel to the podcast, visit patreon.com/letsgetmeta. Thank you for listening. Stay meta.
Let's get meta.
Metaphysical.
Let's get meta.
Metaphysical.
Let's get meta.
Metaphysical.
Let's get meta.
Metaphysical.